Every time I talk about like where my music comes from and like where my seat of Mauli comes from, it comes from being raised with chants and dances from my mom and that rearing of ceremony, like a deep sense of kuleana to place, to something more than just me. So like for me, it starts all the way in my childhood, growing up, dancing about the hillsides of Waimea, dancing about the waters of Waimea. I grew up learning of these places through the ancient practices of my people. And so just that alone taught me responsibility and taught me also how important it is to record what we are living right now, because that is the only way that we know what our ancestors lived through and survived is because they wrote about it, they sang about it, they chanted about it, and somebody never stopped doing that so that we would know that this is a part of our legacy as Kanaka Oiwi people. So when I was like 10, 11 years old, I was reading about Lili Okalani and Queen Emma and memorizing their genealogies. And I didn't know at the time that we come from a long line of storytellers, a long line of genealogists from Kohala. And so it was from that time of my life that I already knew that this is my heart. This is my walk in this world. And then it blossomed into, okay, how are you going to how are you going to remember Mo'olelo? Like, how are you just going to even remember it? And I heard this one story from my auntie Ku'ule Keakealani about Mauna Kea. And it was in the second year of my Hawaiian language journey at Kaka'ula o Ke'ilikulani. And it was the first mo'olelo I could understand in Hawaiian, like all the way through, because I wasn't raised speaking my language. And I fell in love with this story about Kukahau'ula and Poli'ahu coming together and loving one another at sunrise and sunset. And I woke up every single day, like before the sun, to go see the Ho'ailona, the sign of Kukahau'ula coming up the mountain at sunrise, and then the same at sunset. And I wrote a song for it. I received a melody, and it was the first song I ever wrote in my life. And I wrote it so that I could remember. I wanted to remember this is what their love sounds like to me. This is what this story sounds like to me. So this is like my depth, my connection to the Mauna comes from love stories. And because of that story, I felt even more responsibility to protect Mauna Kea so that our children can be raised knowing, oh, that's Kukahau'ula coming up Mauna Kea. And we know that story because somebody passed it down to us. Somebody wrote a song. Somebody made a chant. We cannot protect places if we don't love them, if we don't have an actual connection to place. So I love that our ancestors passed down the wisdom through love stories. We see it with Hi'iakaika Pele. We see it in Kamapua'a, Laie Kawai, Kiao Mele Mele. Every single story has love in it because Aloha Aina literally means the love that we have for the land, like the love that we have for family, because Aina comes from the word Aiga. That is the mo'oku'auhau of that word. If we are not loving our land like we love family, then why are we even here? And so this is what my music is about. It's about showcasing and like literally calling people in to say, this is what's happening in Hawaii. So every single song on my album and every single song that I write has an intention to be a manifestation for the reality that we could live if we chose to, our free will choice to unite. I love that I was raised by plenty aunties, plenty uncles, around my cousins. Like I was raised at the beach, Anaiho'omalu. And at that beach is the first time in my life that I ever fully in my body, fully in my soul, fully surrounded by community and family, and also the same place that I felt displacement. It was sold. That place was sold. And so that gathering space for our ohana was stripped and stolen from us. And so when I say that I love community, I also say I love spaces that are free for us to gather, because we cannot gather safely um, without like fighting for our spaces, like all the places that we come together to talk about restoration, reconciliation, all these spaces, we're fighting for them. We're literally standing up for them together. So it gives us a intention, a like intention, and a like purpose. But imagine if we didn't have to do that. Imagine if we could have a space to gather in community without having to worry about the police coming, without having to worry about getting arrested. Because the first time in my life that I felt community like I did in my childhood was on Mauna Kea. But that was also on a front line. Like we learned how to give without transactions. There was no transactional aloha, without conditions. You needed a jacket, people took their jackets off of their backs and gave it. You needed support, we stopped everything to hold that kind of space. You needed ceremony, we had an aha 3 times a day. When we talk about community and being able to live in resilience with one another, that was Mauna Kea. But that also was the same space that our kupuna, 38 kupuna, were arrested. That was the same space where police were literally looking at us with guns and batons and pepper spray. So I wish, though, we could feel that feeling of community safely and with freedom. Like, I don't want to have to write out of a place of trauma and like a place of desperation. And so the only way I get through it is being in community with the people that are my people, because not all skin folk are kinfolk. And we know that. We know that from this Black Lives Matter movement. We know that from the Mauna Kea movement. And so, like, what I've also learned about community is discernment. I know my people by the way my na'au feels. I know my people by the way that, like, how I feel completely in my body around them. Community is ancient. We call it kaiaulu. And we survived by that. And now in this time, we know our language enough to be able to read about what holding space meant for our people. We know what chants to do to unite together. And we're creating intentional space, even if it's over Zoom. I literally did that just yesterday. I held another chanting class for women that have gone through terrible traumas so that we would have something to call upon. So when they said, hey, I need this from you, I need help, I can't do this chant myself right now, we'll be able to do it together. That's the whole intention of that space. So we're now reclaiming our community and reclaiming our sisterhoods by remembering what it was like for our kupuna to love one another and to be held by one another in prayer and ceremony and ritual. And so, again, this life is really hard and it's a crazy time to be alive, but we didn't manifest at this time for nothing. We must have enough strength and courage to be facing what is happening in this world with enough strength and wisdom and guidance from our kupuna to be able to survive it. I know that my kupuna, they're waiting. They're waiting for us to do this together. And I just feel like humbled to have been born Hawaiian, first of all, to know my language, to have been raised as a chanter and a dancer. I know what my blessings are because of how my mother and my kupuna raised me. And so I don't want to waste it. Yeah.